Recently I received a number of emails asking me about what I meant about intervals, something I discussed in a newsletter not long ago. People say, I just don't understand intervals. What in the world are you talking about? Well, I thought maybe we'll use this quick tip to clear that up. I started the newsletter out comparing intervals, or comparing the intervals of music with the intervals of painting, or any kind of visual art. In fact, it has to do with the rhythm of painting, and we have to realize that it is the rhythm within our painting that really makes it interesting. Lots of other things too, but that rhythm makes it interesting, and we can create an interesting rhythm by intervals. Now in music, it's the space between notes that creates the intervals. So, you know, something like twinkle, twinkle, little star, it's all the same. But something like bum ba dum bum bum bum, that's a little bit more interesting. In painting, I've got three examples here of intervals. First of all, an interval in painting is the space between two edges. You can just remember that, two edges. If you think about notes in music, the space between two notes is the interval. So in both cases, we've got verticals we're dealing with. So the space between two edges is an interval. Now I've got some photographs here as examples. You see this in this photograph, the intervals are the space between this edge and the edge of the picture. Also, the space between this edge and this side, between the edge on this side of the tree and this side of the tree. Then an interval between the edge here and the edge here. Interval between edge here and edge here. And you see these three, these are the same interval. That's twinkle, twinkle, little star, like that. You can see the intervals in these trees are a little bit more varied. There's less space between these than between these two than there are between this one and that one. That makes a more interesting interval. And so when you see a scene like this one, where the intervals seem to be predicted, our job as painters is to change those intervals and give them a little bit more variation so that we make a more interesting painting, so that the rhythm in the painting has some variation in it and it's not just the same old, same old, same old. So painters have to control certain things. I'm going to do just a little bit of an example here just to show what I'm talking about, because being aware of this and developing a consciousness of it is part of the whole problem. So let's do just a little bit here, not trying to do a whole painting for you, but just do a little bit. And so suppose, let's see, within this area right in here. All right, suppose that we had, well, let's say, suppose we just put in here something that might represent the foliage of a forest right in here. And I'll just do this kind of very, very quickly. And so now already in this foliage, in the what I would consider the shadow part of the foliage of this forest, already I have set a rhythm. I have a space. I have the space between the edges of the shadow and between the edges of where the light would be. And so now watch how this works. So I might continue to develop the shadow portion. And I'm not going to be concerned so much with trying to do a painting here. It's just a quick study to sort of demonstrate to you what this whole interval thing means. Now that shadow may continue like this, and as that shadow area continues, I have the width of the shadow. So I have the edge here, I have the width of the shadow against the width of the light. I have the width of the shadow here against the width of the light. So if I'm conscious, as I develop that shadow area, if I'm conscious to keep those widths varying, not have the same width all the way down of a shadow area, for example. So I'll have it smaller here, it gets wider here, it narrows up there, it gets wider here. You might get a little bit more narrow here, a little bit more narrow there, we may have then another bit of shadow right over here. So I'm not going to go further than that with the whole shadow concept. So then, as it goes down, another thing we would be aware of is the width of this area against the width of that area. If those are the same, it's going to be boring. So in a landscape especially, it doesn't matter what you have in front of you, you want this interval between this edge and this edge to be different, or either larger or smaller, and between this edge and this edge. Now that's a horizontal instead of a vertical, but it's nevertheless part of the problem. So I'm going to go ahead now, just very briefly, I'm going to throw in areas here that might represent a brief study, just a brief, quick study of an area of light within foliage. Now here will be the same thing. As we're putting in an area of light in the foliage, we keep an eye on that to be sure that the interval continues to change. You might say it will fluctuate, the interval between the edge of the light on either side, it might fluctuate, or meaning wider in some places or more, or narrower in other places. But the thing is that it will not be the same all the way down in order to keep it keep the whole thing interesting and keep it rhythmic. And there are other things that keep it rhythmic too, but that's mainly it. Now let's see what happened. All right, and here's what you have to watch. If you put that light in, sometimes you have to watch the shadow area. So what happened here, I got the same interval between here and here and here and here. So what I'm going to do is go back and give that variation. There we go, right there. Give that width of that interval variation between that light and shadow. Briefly going to throw in what might represent a landscape or ground here, just to show you one other thing, and that is placing the tree trunks within that area. Once again, no matter how the tree trunks might be placed within your purview, the change of intervals is your job. You change nature in order to get a better composition. As artists, we're doing more than copying nature. We're using nature as a reference for something bigger. So to put in the tree trunks, if I'm putting in tree trunks, well, maybe something like this, that would be, it's a different color. If I'm putting in those tree trunks, wherever I put the first one, say if I put it right here, for example, we'll just make those kind of, again, keeping it relatively generic. I'll just have those kind of like that. There's the first one. When I put in the second one, I can put it anywhere in here except in the middle. If I put a tree trunk here between this one and that one, that's an even interval, and that creates a static painting. So what I want to be sure of is that I change the interval, that I can put it either close to this one, or I could put it close to the edge. Now I want to put another one in. If I want to put another one in, I've got to be careful that I don't create equal intervals. So I want unequal intervals between the tree trunks, and also maybe in the width of the trees, but especially between the tree trunks. So I can put another one right close in here, or I can put it closer to the edge. So suppose I say, okay, let's put it closer to the edge. Right here, by putting it closer to the edge, and maybe giving a little bit of tilt, I've created now an unequal and more interesting interval. And that creates then a more interesting painting, or a study in this case, but it creates a rhythmic, it takes you from Twinkle Twinkle Little Star to Bum 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 Bum, a lot more interesting. I'll say one more, we'll just keep going, and the thing is to keep conscious of the spacing between things that change, between edges. That's all in the world it is, and it's no big deal. It's not a whole lot to think about, It's just paying attention to what you're doing as you're doing it. So here I'm making a slightly wider tree trunk. That kind of changes that feeling of interval. And I'll bring that one. See, I've created that wider space between this one and that one, which makes that more interesting. And we can bring it down, let it be a little bit wider down there. And you can see we could continue that. We could do a long horizontal painting of just trees, as long as you keep varying the intervals and of both, not only just the trunks, but varying the intervals of the light and dark patterns. Then you create something that has a wonderful rhythm and interesting to look at, and something that you would want, other people would want to continue to look at instead of taking one glance at it and moving on, which sometimes happens with paintings. Yeah, if you want to get more out of this, go to the newsletter. We have a link right here on the bottom, or where the description is. There's a link to the article of the newsletter. You can see where this whole thing began. And also, you might want to sign up for the newsletter. It's free. It comes out every Saturday morning. Just another tip for you, another tip about painting. And if you have something you'd like for me to address with a quick tip, leave a comment down here, and we'll be happy to put it on the schedule. Also, check out our video lessons at DianeMinds.com. You'll be on that site if you go over to sign up for the newsletter. Just to kill two birds with one stone, although we don't like killing birds. Anyway, there's your quick tip.